starts, as everything does, with the soil, because that's what grows the grass, the flavour of our farm. And our cows also impart a particular flavour and balance to the milk. We've got this lovely hybrid mix of breeds who produce great milk for cheese and are really happy grazing outside for most of the year. We milk the cows and then bring that milk to the cheese dairy. Then the magic starts happening in the cheese dairy.
My day in the dairy starts at 5 in the morning. We pump the milk over from our parlour the day before we want it. We store it overnight. The next morning we then pasteurise the milk at 73 degrees C, which kills off any bacteria in the milk and gives us a clean base for our starter cultures to work. After the pasteuriser, it goes straight into the vats. Each vat can contain up to 4,500 litres of milk.
One of the really special things we've got is our heritage starters, which are this amazing mix of microorganisms dating back to the 60s and 70s, which give tremendous complexity to the flavour. More difficult to use than industrial starters, but give something really special.
We add the starter cultures. These are different strains of lactobacillus bacteria. They feed on the lactose in the milk, which creates lactic acid. And it's the lactic acid that we measure during the cheese make to find out how our cheese is making. So the starter cultures create lactic acid. After your starter's gone in, we have a ripening time of about 10 to 15, 20 minutes for the starters to work. And then we add our rennet. The rennet sets the milk to a junket. We know the milk is set by testing it by pulling our finger up through the junket, and we're looking for a clean split. This takes approximately 40 to 50 minutes. We then put cutting knives on the vats and we cut the curd down to about fingernail size, so the curds and whey are floating around together in the vat. We then scald or cook the cheese. We cook it to 41 degrees C. As a general rule of thumb, the higher the scald temperature, the harder the cheese. The curds and whey carry on stirring for another hour before we pitch them down into the coolers.
We bring the curds and whey down from the vats into the coolers. Curd emerges, starts cooling down, and that is the point at which pretty much the cheese is set.
We drain off the whey. We then cut the curd that's left into slabs and cheddar it, which is basically turning the slabs backwards and forwards and stacking them up. It's this process that gets the moisture out of the curd, so you're driving whey out, and it's through stacking it and turning it that the texture changes on the cheese. We continue to do this until it reaches the acidity we want, which is a lactic acid of 0.49. At that point, we then mill the curds, put them through a chip mill. It chips them up into small pieces, and we add the salt at that stage. It has to be mixed thoroughly and evenly throughout the vat.
So salting cheese, well, that's actually one of the really important steps. And it's not just about the flavour. When we put the salt in, that stops the lactic acid bacteria developing acidity any further. If we didn't put the salt in, it develops a flavour technically known as baby sig. It's absolutely disgustingly bitter. So that's why we have the salt in. It also brings a bit of the moisture out, which assists the maturation. And we use Cornish sea salt because you get this much more complex flavour.
Once the curds have been milled and salted, we then shovel it into moulds and punched by hand and put into presses. In the press, it's pressed up at 90 psi, which is pounds per square inch, which is a high pressure. It's a hard cheese and it needs a lot of pressure to drive the moisture out. It sits in the press initially overnight. The next morning we come in and we bump all the cheese out. We wash them in scalding brine, which helps the rind to set because we're a traditional cloth-bound cheese. It sets the rind on the outside. We change the cloth, we put a smoother cloth on, which then gives you a better finish on the outside of the cheese. Goes back in the press overnight again. The next morning we bump the cheese out again, and we then lard the cheese and put a larded cloth on. This helps to protect the cheese during maturation. It's put back in the press again overnight, which is your final press, and the next morning they're bumped out, labelled and put into the store for maturing.
So the first place the cheese goes after the cheese dairy is the nursery store. We call it the nursery store because we hand turn the cheese, because at that stage it's really quite delicate and we want to look after it and nurture it. After about a month, we start seeing this beautiful growth of mould that we call a mould garden. At about 3 months old, we'll bring the cheese down to this cathedral of cheese, our main cheese store. Now we age the cheese, we mature the cheese to take it from that fresh curd stage, which is absolutely delicious, but to develop those additional flavours that you can get when you age the cheese. We grade the cheeses and taste them so that we know how each vat is tasting, how it will mature, and which customer we should send it to. So what you've seen is a picture of everything that we do. What we're doing, it's matching up the extraordinary microbiome of the soil, everything in the grass, everything in the cows' rumens, that microbiome, and then the microbiome of the cheese starter, then the moulds in the mould garden, and how that is developed and creates wonderful flavours with the attention and intention of all of the people who work here.